answers are going to be filled with lots of performance tips. These are questions that we will get from time to time, either here at HBS HQ or online. I know that they are going to give you lots and lots of immediately helpful performance tips that you can put into either your on-stage performances or your virtual performances. So let's start with the first question.
The first question is about openings. People always want to know how they should start, and often they ask, should I start by telling them about myself?
Should I start by telling them about myself? No, you don't need to do that. First of all, you would rather have someone else do that through the bio. In fact, the bio is the opening of your speech. So the bio only needs to do a few things. Number one, demonstrate that you know what the audience wants to know and or have done what the audience wants to do. So that you know what the audience wants to know and or have done what the audience wants to do. Additionally, it can lead you into the speech. It can be the opening for your speech. Because look, if you come out at the very beginning and you say, well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, and then you start to list your credentials, trying to prove your credibility, the audience may feel that you are starting from a weak position, and or they just may not care, because the audience probably doesn't care about you until they know that you care about them. So let the bio do the work for you, and make sure that they read it just as you've written it. Don't let them wing the bio. Make sure that they read it just as you've written it. What's next?
How do I enter the stage?
Oh, how I enter the stage? Well, let's start with how we shouldn't enter the stage. Okay, I'm going to go off stage here, imagining that I'm coming out from the wings. One of the things that people will often do is they will walk directly to the center stage, then turn and say, I'm really glad to be here. There's a couple issues with this. Number one, they're stuck upstage. You don't want to be stuck up against a wall unless there's a very specific reason that you're stuck up against the upstage portion of the stage, up against the wall. And number two, sometimes I think people don't realize that the audience can see them as they're walking on the stage. So this looks very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Robotic?
Robotic, yes. It doesn't look natural. Plus, the visual looks, when you're walking just parallel to the stage, doesn't look very good. What you want are angles. So when you enter the stage, you come in at an angle. Additionally, if you say, I'm really happy to be here, well, what's the alternative? That you're really pissed off that you're there? Of course you're happy to be there. So show them. You can come, from the house onto the stage. You can come from either side of the stage. If you're on a stage where, you can come from the very, very back of the stage. All of that all of those are great options. But just work the angles rather than staying parallel to the stage. As soon as you walk out, bring some energy so that they know you are there to create a transformational experience.
What should I do if the amount of time that I have is shorter than what I planned for?
Yeah, so what if you have 60 minutes and then right before you go on they say, well, actually, can you cut it back a little bit? Can you just do 40 minutes? And it happens. Please avoid coming onto stage and saying, I was supposed to have 60 minutes, but they just cut it back, so now I've only got 40. I'll do my best. To try to bring. There's so much I wanted. I wish I could have the 40 minutes, but I'm really sorry that I'm not going to be able to do everything that I wanted to do today. Well, if you do that, the first thing that the audience thinks is, oh God, there's something missing. This isn't going to be as good as it was supposed to be. And they feel like they've lost something, that something has been taken away from them. Instead, just deliver during those 40 minutes because the audience has no idea what you are going to do. So never apologize for time that you do not have. Now, in order to be able to take a 60-minute presentation and turn it into a 40-minute presentation, you've got to know your material inside and out, because you've got to know what you can pull out, how you can cut 20 minutes off of that. And so the work that we've done today and the work we'll continue to do tomorrow, and hopefully the work that we will do with you in the future, will give you the tools that you need to be able to make that kind of adjustment on the fly quite quickly. Because if you're just giving a speech that you're unfamiliar with, if you're winging it, it's going to be very hard to make that kind of adjustment because you're not going to be able to manage the time very well. So never apologize for time that you do not have.
Michael, what about people who say, I'm just not very dynamic. I'm not a very dynamic speaker. What should I do?
So if you don't feel like you're a dynamic speaker, there are a number of different things you can do. The first thing to think about from a content development perspective is as follows. Focus on contrast. Because when what you're doing is the same for a long period of time, it gets bland. So, for example, let's say that you went to listen to Yo-Yo Ma play the cello. And he's arguably one of the greatest cellists of all time. And he started by playing the most beautiful note that you've ever heard in your life. But he played it for 3 hours. You'd run screaming out of the theater. Because even absolute perfection can get boring at worst and boring at best and aggravating at worst. So what you want to do is build in contrast. And there are a number of types of contrast. So let's focus on 3 of them for now. There is content contrast. So that you're designing your content so that it is different throughout your entire presentation. So you're not using the same type of content. You're not only sharing tips or only sharing stories or only sharing protocols, but rather you're using lots of different frameworks. You're using stories, protocols, tips, audience interaction experiences, and more, so that there is a lot of contrast in the type of content you deliver. The second type of contrast that you can build into any type of presentation is delivery contrast, so that you're not delivering in the exact same way throughout the entire presentation. If you just stood on the stage and just stayed in this one spot for 60 minutes, it can be done. There are some performers that can do this very effectively, but if the way that you're delivering the content throughout the entire presentation is exactly the same, it's going to get boring. You want to try to deliver in as many different ways as possible. So yes, you might be center stage, but you're also going to use blocking to use the whole stage. You may be in the audience at some point. You may use visuals and video. You may use audio. You may use audience interaction. You may have audience doing things with each other. So you want to try to build in as much delivery contrast as you possibly can. You may be on a stool at one point. You may be in a chair at one point. You may be standing on a chair at one point. You may be lying down on the stage at another point. There are so many different ways that you can use the space that you're in, and there are so many different ways that you can use the screen that you're in if you're doing a virtual presentation as well. But the contrast is what's going to create more dynamic experience for the audience. So we've got content contrast, delivery contrast, and then we also have emotional contrast. You want to bring your audience on a roller coaster ride of emotions. You want to provoke them. You want to soothe them. You want to tease them. You want to inspire them so that they feel differently throughout the whole presentation. So it's not just the same thing. Because, even think about a conversation that you have with someone. Take maybe one of your kids. If you're trying to change the behavior of somebody else, and you're only using one tactic, say, criticizing them, well, that's not going to be particularly effective, or even provoking them for the entire conversation. That's probably not going to be effective. We want to use as many different types of actions to influence the way people feel, so that we have content contrast, delivery contrast, and emotional contrast. Now, if you continue to work with us, we're going to bring you on a roller coaster ride of skill development so that you know how to use your voice to create contrast, and so much more. But those are the three fundamental elements of creating contrast to create more dynamic experiences for the people who are watching your performances.
What about people who have been told that they speak too fast?
Yeah. So, go ahead and put it into the chat box if you've been told that you speak too fast. You probably do it quite. Yeah, actually, they probably already did it because they do things so quickly that they already probably said that they speak too fast. Here's the thing. I understand why people have told you that you speak too fast. In fact, sometimes speaking coaches will tell speakers to slow down. And the advice is well intentioned. The issue is that it's often misinterpreted. Speaking quickly is not necessarily a problem. The problem is not pausing. Because what if I actually slowed down and started speaking like this, so that all my words were already, you maybe they even clicked away. They're like, I can't even listen to that. Even just a few seconds of that kind of slow, monotone, overly methodical, it's just too much. The problem is that if you don't pause, it seems like you're speaking too quickly. The brain can pick up language quite quickly, but they need that pause to consume what you're saying, to process what you're saying, so that it lands. So build in pauses, because there is power in a pause.
People sometimes ask, well, what should I do with my body? Should I stand in one place? Should I move from side to side? What should I do?
Yeah. So there is no rule about what you should do with respect to the work you do on stage. You might be able to design a speech where you actually stay in the same spot for the entire speech. It might work very, very well. But it also may limit your ability to create a visual and kinesthetic experience for the audience. On the other hand, if you are just pacing back and forth like this, trying to, I'm talking to these people, now I'm talking to these people, now I'm talking to these people, not only will you like burn a path in the carpet on the stage, you'll also not be able to focus the audience's attention. Everything starts to seem the same when what you're saying, if what you're doing on the stage stays the same, you're just pacing back and forth, then it seems no matter what you're saying that it's the same, because the physical body is doing the same thing. Your body should match what's coming out of your mouth. So you can create experiences for the audience that are dynamic and full of contrast if you use the stage. If I'm trying to share an experience about moving forward, I can move forward on the stage. If I'm talking about something that happened in the past, like there was a time when I can move backwards. I can use the stage, I can block and stage my movements to help create a much more interesting, much more dynamic experience for the audience. So your movement should be intentional, so that you know where you're going, when you're going, and why you're going there. Where you're going, when you're going, and why you're going there. Because if you're just wandering around the stage, then what you're sharing is going to seem like it is wandering around in your brain, as opposed to very intentional and focused. So there isn't one way to do it. The key is that it's intentional, that you know where you're going, when you're going, and why you're going there.
What if I want to get creative and move into the audience?
That's a fantastic thing to do. Moving into the audience can be wonderful. You just got to make sure that you respect the bubble. You know, if you've got an audience right here in the front, can I go into the audience? Can you pick me up if I go here? Okay, so I'm going to come here. Right now, so imagine I've got people here in the front row, and I'm really quite close to them. There's somebody sitting right here. This is a little weird, right? It's a little strange. Their head's like right here. I'm standing right here, and they might feel a little bit uncomfortable. If you're moving this way and they're going this way, you know there's a problem. So make sure that you respect the bubble. Additionally, if you go into the back of the house is where people are sitting, and you spend too much time there, the people in the front have to crick their necks to look at you. And most people are only going to do that for a short period of time. They're not going to turn all the way around. They'll just sort of look like this for a little bit, and then they'll just turn around. And if you've got people who are not willing to look at you, if they've turned away from you, then you've got a problem. So if you do go into the back of the house, make sure you get back up onto the stage pretty quickly.
So just to clarify, can I move and talk at the same time?
I don't know, can you? Of course you can move and talk at the same time. We've seen speaking coaches give this advice to speakers. They say, do not move and talk at the same time. But you can do that in real life, so why can't you do that on stage? The key is that you're intentional about your movement so that you're not moving unintentionally on really important points. So that if you're making a big point, you are standing and landing that big point. But if I need to make a transition, I can move over to this side of the stage quite easily while I'm still speaking. Look, I can move back to center stage while I'm still speaking. I can move over here to stage left while I'm still speaking. And then I can move back to center stage while I'm still speaking. So you can absolutely move and speak at the same time. Just make sure the movement and the language are connected and are intentional.
Is there someplace that I should be for the most important ideas? Someplace on the stage?
Yeah, generally, the most important ideas are shared center stage. Doesn't mean it always is the case, but generally, center stage is where you want to be for the most important ideas. Sometimes downstage, center stage will work effectively. Maybe upstage, but less likely. So your center stage or downstage, center stage for your most important, most impactful ideas.
Now, what do you have to say to the people who come in and say, you know what, I hear you on all of this prep work and rehearsal work, but my energy's better when I wing it. I think I just rise to the occasion.
Yeah, you don't. You do not rise to the occasion. Look, the military have an expression. They say you do not rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. Look, we've been fortunate to work with a lot of veterans, Navy SEALs, fighter pilots, and others. We've worked with a lot of athletes, Olympians, and other elite level athletes. And I find that they come in here with a particular focus on preparation, because the situations that they've been in life require that they perform at their absolute best. So they don't wing it. They plan and prepare for how they're going to execute when the stakes are high. But experts, they say, well, I know my stuff, so I'll just, whatever comes to me in the moment will be really impactful, and I'm just so good on my feet that's really going to win the day. And the fact of the matter is, you don't. You might do a fine job when you wing it. People might tell you, that was great, I really liked your energy, you've got all this energy, it's exciting. All of that is true. But you are still operating below your potential. So you may not have experienced your potential as a performer yet. So you do not yet know what you're capable of. But trust us. We've been working with thousands of performers for many, many, many years. And every single performer that walks in these doors, every single performer that we have worked with is better when they leave, no matter what stage of development they're at. Now, why are they better? Because they are better trained and they are better prepared. So if you want to look like you know what you're doing, the easiest way to do that is to be well prepared. So there's going to be a point in time during your rehearsal process where you will feel like you are not as quick on your feet. You will feel like you're losing some of that energy or excitement. That's only because you're still in the early stages of development of that performance. But when you get to the point where you know your material so well that you do not have to think about it, that it comes to you naturally, organically, in the moment, then to the audience it looks like it's the first time that you've ever delivered it. But you know that it is not the first time. It may be the 100th time or the 1000th time. It just gets easier and easier and easier and easier. And yeah, you might even build in little mistakes to it so that it feels really, really organic. But you know what you're saying, when you're saying it, and why you're saying it. And as a result, you can bring a lot more confidence, a lot more power, and you can be a lot more effective to create a transformational experience for the audience.
So how about Q&A? Because we have a lot of people who come to us and say, oh, I'm really, really good at Q&A. What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah, and you may be very good at Q&A. I love Q&A because I love to be able to answer people's immediate questions. It feels so relevant and impactful to them. The reason that people often think that they're very good at Q&A is because they're experts. They actually know their subject matter really, really well. But there are techniques that you can use that will work for in-person audiences, online audiences, podcasts, radio interviews, TV interviews, and any environment where you're asked questions that will raise the level of your ability to deliver. So there's a recipe that you can use that has 4 ingredients. If you know these 4 ingredients and you apply these 4 ingredients every single time you answer a question, you're going to have a much more effective Q&A session. Number 1, reward the person who's asking the question. Now that might seem obvious, but if you don't look like you really wanted the question or you didn't like the question or it wasn't a good question, then people are less likely to ask you more questions. Now I was at an event with 5,000 people and one of the speakers, very well-known speaker, was asked a question and he stood up and he looked at the person who asked the question and he said, well, that's a stupid question. Now, it was a very big space, and there were microphones in the 2 aisles, and there were people lined up behind those microphones. You know what everybody else, and when I say everybody, I mean everybody else who was standing at a microphone waiting to ask a question did? This is what they did. And they all sat down. Because who's going to ask a question of somebody who is going to tell them that their question is stupid? So, reward them. Now, we don't reward them by saying, well, that's a great question. Because what if you don't say it to the next person? The next person says, what am I, chopped liver? Well, my question wasn't very good. And if you say it to every single person, then it seems like it's pat and it doesn't mean anything. But we can reward people with a smile. We can get excited. We can give them a virtual high five. We can say, ha ha. So there's lots of ways you can reward. You can throw them candy if you want, but give them a reward first. Reward, because that's going to inspire other people to keep asking questions. Number 1 is reward. The second R is to repeat the question. Now, I don't need to repeat every question that Amy asks because Amy has a microphone and you can hear the question perfectly, and she is also asking the question in a very concise, well-organized way. But that's not always how people ask questions. Sometimes when people ask questions, it's a little convoluted. They're not 100% sure how to frame it because they're still trying to contextualize the question. And so when you repeat it, it does two things. Number one, everybody can hear it. And number two, you can help make sure that everybody actually understands the question being asked. And then the person who asked the question has an opportunity to feel really quite comforted, and they take a sigh of relief because they say, oh, yeah, that's what I was asking. Thank you. So first reward, then repeat. Then the third R, I think, is the most important, and that's to relate the question to everyone in the room. Sometimes when someone asks a question, they will ask a hyper-specific question. And if they ask a hyper-specific question, other people in the room may think, oh, yeah, that's not for me. And then they'll just, start texting on their phone or, waiting for the next question. Maybe the next one will be more relevant. But if you can relate the question to everyone in the room, then they will pay attention throughout all of Q&A, not just to the answers to the questions that they think are relevant to them. Then the fourth R, the fourth ingredient, is to go back to the person who asked the hyper-specific question and give them their answer. If you didn't have a hyper-specific answer for them, you would say, you know what, that's something that I can research. I think I can find that back at the office. If you get me your email afterwards, I'll send you the answer. So those four ingredients will make sure that everybody is well served when you're doing Q&A. And again, it applies to in-person events, online events, podcasts, TV interviews, radio interviews. If you don't have to repeat it, you don't repeat it, but you generally reward, generally repeat, and if you need to reframe it when you're repeating, that can be very, very effective. Then you relate it to everybody, and then finally, refine it back to the individual who asked the hyper-specific question.
What about people who are told that they come across as accusatory or aggressive on stage?
Well, if you do the what do we call this? The stage stalker, you might kind of seem aggressive. You probably want to stay away from that type of physicality on stage. But there's one little thing that you could probably avoid doing that sometimes seems accusatory or even aggressive. Any guess of what it might be? You could probably stop pointing at the audience all the time. Look, I smile a lot because if I don't, I look pretty serious. In fact, if I take off my glasses and, you just have a close-up on my face and I don't smile, I might actually look like a serial killer. Like, I might look like I could hurt you. But if I smile, then my face looks totally different. And then, of course, with glasses on top of that, now I look like a smart person smiling. So, instead of pointing, use an open palm. It's much more collaborative. So if I'm going to reference somebody in the audience, I can reference them this way, or this way, and then this way. Now, it's okay to point once in a while. But if you're going to point, make sure that it's intentional. So you've heard me use the word intentional a number of times just in this class, because intentionality is the hallmark of a great performer. If you're not intentional with your language, with your movement, with your gestures, then you may not realize the effect that your language, your movement, and your gestures are having. So instead of pointing, use an open palm, unless there is a reason that you want to point. But that would be intentional pointing, which would be perfectly fine. So use an open palm. It's much more collaborative.
Do you have any tips on what they should do if a joke doesn't land?
Well, I would say don't explain the joke, because that generally doesn't work. If you have to explain it, just move on. It happens. Every once in a while, you may, try lob out a little joke and it doesn't land. You could try to find a way to save it. But if you work too hard to save it, then it gets a little uncomfortable for the audience. Better just move on, keep going, and get to something that is relevant and is working.
Any ideas about how to transition into a story?
Transitioning into a story. So one of the things that we see people do very often is starting a story by saying, I'm going to tell you a story. Or they say, can I tell you a story? Now, they're not the worst things in the world. In fact, on their face value, there's nothing actually wrong with them. However, people often want to be surprised to find that they're in a story. So just start with the story. Because what happens if you say to an audience, hey, can I tell you a story? And someone goes, actually, no, I'd rather you didn't, because the last one you told was not very good. You're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll skip that one. I don't know what to do now. No, so just go into the story. You know, imagine you were watching a TV show. Imagine you were watching Breaking Bad. And Bryan Cranston, who plays the lead role in that show, showed up on the screen before the episode started, not in character, and just said, hey, by the way, I want to tell you what's going to happen in this episode right now. You'd be like, oh, I wanted to be surprised. I wanted to find out in the moment. And it's the same thing with a story. Just start the story. Just go right into the story seamlessly and easily.
We had a student once come to us, and before they worked with us, they said, one of the reasons I want to work with you is I want to work with you on my stories because I've been told that when I tell my stories, I sound fake. I don't sound like me, and it doesn't feel authentic. Would you speak to that?
Sure. So probably what's happening is that speaker may be using what we call the storyteller voice. And the storyteller voice is a voice that you may go into without realizing it, that sounds a little bit artificial, phony. For example, there was a time when I was young and I was excited. It just doesn't sound real. It's very different than, look, there was a time when I was young and I was excited. That's a natural way of speaking. So the audience wants naturalism. They want theatrical, dramatic naturalism, not something put on. Or if you say, in a world where I was young and short, it's just inauthentic. So we're trying to find naturalism through intentionality and preparation. The better prepared you are, the more natural you can be. It's a paradox. Often people think, you know, as we've mentioned, that if they just wing it, then that's what makes them natural. But they, yes, may be natural, but much of their work won't be effective. So what we're trying to do is to create moments that feel incredibly authentic, very, very natural, but they're well sculpted, they're well crafted. And the preparation is what allows you to create that kind of naturalism. So, if you are prepared and you also know how to leverage the power of improvisation, then you can create spontaneity. Because spontaneity exists at the intersection of preparation and improvisation. Look, this is why people will pay thousands of dollars to go see Hamilton live, but they'll only spend $35 to see an improv show live. Because Hamilton is always going to work. Every single time they do that show, it works. Because they've worked on it for thousands of hours. But if you would spend thousands of dollars for the improv ticket and a lot of it didn't work, you would not be happy, my friend. So make sure that you're prepared and know how to improv in the moment so you can create spontaneity.
What about people who say, I'm not comfortable with the applause. What should I do? It always feels messy.
Oh, you mean at the end?
Yeah, at the end.
Well, sometimes when people end, they say, well, okay, I guess, well, that's all the time I have. Thanks. And then they're gone. And people are like, I guess that was it. When you end, make sure that you put a button on it that is clear and everybody knows that you end. And usually the word thank you tells them that it's over. So when you say thank you, or thank you very much, or you want to say, I've been Michael Port, thank you very much. Whatever your closing is, you take the applause, you enjoy it, you take a bow, and you soak in those applause. The applause, by the way, are certainly an expression of appreciation from the audience, but it's more than that. The applause at the end is an expression of their approval of the ideas. They are saying, I share these ideas. These ideas are mine as well. And if they say, these ideas are mine as well, you've done your job. But if you run out during those applause, if you don't give them an opportunity to affirm through applause their belief in what you've done with them, the transformational experience that you've created, then you lose out on an opportunity for them to stand up and say, yes, this is for me. So take it in, enjoy it. Take a bow, thank them. If you want to blow kisses, you can, but it's not necessary. And then you go. And of course, you can use the musical theater exit if you would like. Just be careful. You got to practice this a few times. I don't know why every single musical that I've ever seen, the performers seem to exit in the exact same way. Here's how it works. You might need to see my feet for this one. So they say, thank you very much, thank you, bow, 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 and then they go. Always. It's always a hop, skip, and a little jump. Always. It's the same way each time. So when you leave, you're done, you say, thank you, and you go. Now, of course, you don't have to do that, but that is the way they do it in musical theater.
What if somebody really wants a standing ovation?
If you really want a standing ovation, do the work. You got to earn it. Standing ovations, don't necessarily mean that the speech was perfect, and if they don't give you a standing ovation, it doesn't mean that it wasn't transformational. Sometimes at the end, people they can't even imagine standing because they're so enthralled. They're clapping, they're thinking, they're crying. There are so many different ways that you can end a presentation. Just going for the standing ovation, often for approval, is not necessarily the most effective way to attempt a close. And sometimes, the audience will give a standing ovation to a speech that they can't remember an hour later. But if you do want a little trick to help inspire a standing ovation, I am willing to give that to you. So, when you take your bow, instead of just bowing this way, you can bow this way. Thank you very much. And people will go, oh, they might stand up because they've been sitting for a while. So you say, thank you very much. Doesn't always work, but it certainly can't hurt. So that'll give you a little edge if you're trying to inspire a standing ovation. And it never hurts for a meeting planner to see an audience standing at the end of a speech that you've given that they've paid you for.
Last question for
Yes.
now. What advice do you have for people who say, I just find it so stressful, I get stage fright, my nerves are sky high, what can I do?
Okay, so look, stress is normal. We all get a little nervous from time to time. We want to do a great job. The stakes may be high, and we care about the experience that the audience is going to have. So that's perfectly reasonable. Some of the best performers in the world get significant stage fright. Barbra Streisand is known for getting sometimes debilitating stage fright. There's a couple things to consider. Number one, why are you doing it? What's the point? If you're doing it for approval, I would suggest just stop now. Don't do it for approval. There will never be enough approval in the world to make it worth the work. What makes it worthwhile is the transformational experiences that you see other people have. That's what makes it worthwhile. So if you're focused on producing results for them, rather than getting approval for yourself, you step outside yourself and are able to focus on what you need to do for the audience. And it actually is calming. It can be very relaxing. Because when you are self-focused, self-absorbed, even self-obsessed, you're thinking throughout your entire speech about how everybody thinks of you. Great performers are not in that space. Great performers are in the space of affecting other people. And when you are focused on affecting other people, trying to help them change the way they feel, change the way they think, and change what they do, those nerves often slip away. They just wash off your back. Because now you're focused with intentionality on the needs that other people have. Additionally, do your homework. If you're well prepared, you have less nerves. Because you know that you know what you're going to do. But if you're going into a situation feeling like, I don't know what I'm going to do at any given moment or how it's going to go, well, then naturally you're going to be nervous. But if you go in there saying, I know exactly how I'm starting, I know where I'm going, I know how I'm ending, I have rehearsed this, I have planned this, I've prepared this, I am confident and comfortable, well, then you're much less nervous. So those are the two critical components of reducing nerves. Number one, get the focus off yourself. Don't worry about yourself. Focus on how you're trying to get them to feel, what you're trying to get them to think, and what you're trying to get them to do. And be prepared. Know what you're going to do in advance, not just in your mind, but actually having done it many, many times prior to going up in front of an audience will make you much more comfortable, and you'll be able to go out and do the work that you were brought in to do, which was deliver transformational, visionary experiences for the people that you serve. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the time. I need a drink of water. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the kitchen to get a drink of water, and we're going to do our close from there. While we're walking to the kitchen, go ahead, write into the chat box what was impactful about this session. What did you learn? What was a tip that you really appreciated? What did you discover? What was revealed to you? What was helpful? Ready? My love, after you. Well, hello. Welcome to the beginning of the conclusion for day one of HBS Stream. I got to tell you, the classes that I saw Amy teach today, they were simping. I mean, your classes were simping.
Okay, boomer.
Boomer? No, I'm Gen X. I was born in 1970, which makes me 50, which means I'm not a boomer.
Okay, the fact that you just said that makes you even more of a boomer.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm going to take that on and say, I'm a boomer, no caps, this was simping, lit up. Yeet. Yeet. I don't know what she's saying. No idea. No idea what's happening. So here's what we need you to do right now. Write into the chat what you discovered today on day one of HBS Stream. What'd you learn? What'd you discover? What was helpful for you? Did you have as much fun as we've been having? Because if it's not fun, then it's not play. And if it's not play, then it's work. And if you turn this into work, you know, it's going to wear on you. It's going to drag on you. And we want to try to find as much play as we possibly can so that it becomes something that we look forward to.
Yes.
As opposed to, oh, I got to do my script. I got to rehearse. As opposed to, I get to work on my script. I get to be creative today. I get to rehearse. That means I get to play. I get to express myself. That's really fun. And the more fun it is, the better you're going to do. So when you see a performer on stage or in front of the camera, if they're having fun, it translates. It doesn't mean that you can't deliver any value as long, you know, that doesn't mean that if you have fun but don't deliver any value, that it's still effective. No, it has to be effective for sure, but it certainly helps the experience for the audience if you're having fun when you do it.
And one of the things we've seen over the course of the pandemic is that this kind of process can become like a sanctuary, not something else on your to-do list, but a sanctuary where you, as Michael said, you look forward to doing it. You look forward to rehearsals. You look forward to the script development or the post-it work. And so perhaps, especially during this time, it's good to have a creative project to work on.
Yeah, HPS is a creative home for many, many people. Now, our students will continue to come back and work here at HBS HQ, and what we found over the last year and a half is we were able to create that same community, that same culture, that same creative space online as well. And, partially because we had a lot of experience in online programming prior to the pandemic, half of our grad programming was historically virtual because you didn't need to come here for all of that work. Ultimately, you got to be, in a place and with a group of people that are going to support you taking chances, support your big ideas that you may not have fully formed yet. And so, if you're sharing them with people that don't have your back, that may interfere with your ability to form them fully over time. But when you're with a group of people that have your back, that are going through a similar process, it makes a big difference. And I think you probably experienced that even in the chat today when you saw the positivity and the warmth and the care that everybody here in the chat took with each other. So I want to thank you for that. That was something that inspired us throughout the day and makes the experience better for each other and ultimately for yourself as well. Speaking of thank you.
Oh,
what a wonderful transition.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat
Yeah.
that they've been told that they shouldn't say thank you at the end of a speech. I'm not sure why. I don't think that was indicated in the chat. But one of the things that we try to do is show you all the different options that you have available to you. Just like I mentioned earlier, we're often giving you processes and protocols, frameworks that you can use to build your speech and then perform it. But we rarely use absolutes. We rarely say you can never do this or you have to do this or you should always do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is a creative art. So there isn't one way to do it. A creative art gives each individual an opportunity to express themselves in a way that is meaningful and effective for the audience that they serve. And every audience is different. And then additionally, because it's a creative art, if you get locked into having to do it a certain way, you generally constrain yourself. And a constrained performer is generally not as effective a performer. So there may be some situations where it's more effective to say thank you than not. But there may be other situations where it's less effective to say thank you. So it's going to be often dependent on the situation, but there isn't a rule that suggests you should never thank an audience. It would be like, it would be like if someone invited us over to their house and we went there just like an audience is invited to a space or a theater or a ballroom to, experience some speakers or thought leaders. The audience is often going to say thank you for doing that for us, and the speaker or the host is going to say thank you for coming.
Yes.
We're enjoying this experience together. You've been a 10 out of 10 audience. I want to thank you for that. There's absolutely no rule that says you can or can't do that. We should always look at what in this moment, in this situation, is going to be more effective, and that's the litmus test we use.
I think of our days in the theater where there would be so many different ways of taking a bow. I remember some people, they would take their bow like this, and others would take their bow by putting their hand on their heart and just looking around the audience and acknowledging. And some people would take a bow by going, great big sweeping diva bows. And there are so many ways to take a bow or to acknowledge or to close a speech. So overall, I think our point is don't lock yourself in, especially because you're working to cultivate your style of performance. not ours. We give you tools and processes and protocols to help crack it open for you. But ultimately, the tools that we're giving you are so that you can bring out the most compelling version of yourself, the most effective version of yourself. What we don't want is for anyone to come out of deep training with us and have other people say, oh, that's a heroic public speaking speaker, or that's an Amy and Michael Port trained speaker, as if they were mimicking our style. Don't mimic our style of performance. All of these tools are here to help you find your own unique style, because as Michael said, there is not just one way to make art.
Yeah, and the craft ultimately should be transparent so that you're not watching craft at work, you're experiencing something transformational. As an audience member, the speech that you're giving changes the way they feel, the way they think, and what they do. You're using craft to affect that result, but if first and foremost they're watching the craft, then you're not necessarily making the emotional connection with them and the intellectual connection that is going to change some outcome for them, either in the present or in the future. And so we like to take this approach because we think it leaves room for more voices, for more different styles of performance. People have the opportunity to express themselves in ways that are unique just to them, and as a result, they can create their own space for themselves as a speaker. The last thing we want to do is look at another speaker and say, well, I want to be like that speaker. Now, you may want to have a career like that speaker, or you may want to be as effective as that speaker, but it would not be a good idea to try to copy another speaker. Even if you are a good mimic, you could probably do a decent job. But the copying of speakers gave us a decade or more of speakers saying to an audience, yes or yes. They would ask a question and say yes or yes. Well, that was something that somebody started and then somebody else picked up, and then it picked up and just kept carrying on. But I'm not sure that most of the people who picked it up and started carrying on with it really thought about, well, what am I doing with that? How do I make the audience feel? What's the outcome I'm trying to achieve? Is this in line with my brand, with my personality, with my style? So I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with say yes or yes, but it's not something I would use because it doesn't fit my particular style of teaching. My particular choices around education are going to be a little bit different. It doesn't make it wrong, but when you see things that you like, ask yourself, how can I find a way to have a similar effect, but find my own way of doing it? What's unique about the way that I can present this particular technique or strategy or style? And it just gives you a lot more freedom, and you're not worried about whether you are like other people, or not like enough for, I'm just myself. That's it. That's the best thing you can do. And generally, if you have craft, then you take the best of yourself, you marry it with craft, and you can create transformational experiences for the audiences. And, we say all the time that a speech has the power to change the world and the people in it, including the speaker. In order to give a transformational performance, something in you needs to change. The way that you're showing up needs to change. This expansiveness of your ideas might need to change. The commitment that you have to your audience may need to change. The stakes at which you bring to the work may need to change. So all we're doing is we're looking at what do we need to affect in order to have the most impactful effect on the audience. So what do we need to change them? Because if we just think about changing them, then often we miss the opportunity that comes from a transformational experience for ourselves, which puts us into a new role as a thought leader, and might be a slightly different role than you've played in the past. So let's see what they had to say about their experience here.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, there's so many. Okay, Here they are. Let's see.
Interesting. Julia says, winging it is natural, but maybe not effective.
Yeah, right. So that's a really good point, because people say, well, I like it because it feels natural. Well, it may feel natural to you, but it may not be as effective. Ultimately, what we're trying to produce is something that feels incredibly natural to the audience. If it feels natural to the audience, it's also going to feel natural to you. If it doesn't feel natural to you, it won't feel natural to them. But once it feels natural to them, that means it's natural to you, and vice versa. And then we're more effective.
And sometimes we have to get outside our comfort zone first in order to take what feels natural to us within a small frame and make it possible to feel natural within a much larger scope of options.
That's right. Stephen said, earn the reward recognition, but don't let that be the reason for speaking. Yes, similar to what Yogita said, be in service of the audience. Focus on the audience, not yourself, to quell your nerves.
Good.
Thosi and Bulawi.
Bulewa say that was
Bulewa.
extremely insightful. Thank you both so much. So much value for a free workshop.
Excellent.
Good.
Imagine, I think, is the name. Love your energy and appreciate how generous you both were. It is really our pleasure. We never take this for granted. You know, we've had the pleasure over the years to work with thousands of really interesting people, and each person is just as interesting. When you're really curious about people, this work is